Well, hello there. Welcome to another episode. And this one is going to be a little bit different. It's been a little bit while since I've had a political type of episode. But we've got some new developments that seem proper to talk about. So this episode is going to be called Kamala versus Trump, The Battle Begins, / GOP Extremism Exposed. And when I say extremism, I mean like Nazi type of crap. So welcome to another episode of Critical Weight Theory. Here we delve into the latest political happenings at times with a critical eye and a dash of humor here and there. I mean, to the extent that, anything is even worth laughing about. Things are getting pretty serious, but, I suppose it's a fact that life is always a little bit zany and dark and crazy at any given point in history, and the modern era is definitely something that produces a lot of ridiculousness. So today we're talking about the recent shakeup in the Democratic Party that has Fox News in a frenzy. Kamala Harris is in and Biden is out. So grab your popcorn if you have any ready, because this episode is going to be a wild ride. Well, to the extent that any podcast episode can be a wild ride. So first, let's address the elephant in the room. Joe Biden has indeed dropped out of the presidential race, and Kamala Harris has stepped in. Fox News is in panic mode, which, let's be honest, is their default setting anyway. But this time, their fear might be justified, because Kamala, so far, is actually doing a good job, surprisingly, in gaining momentum. With Biden out and Kamala in, Trump might actually face a real challenge, and they don't even know how to properly attack her, because all they have is, picking on her for being a woman and also picking on her for not being white. And, that's not going to win over as many moderates as they might need to actually win, so they don't know what to do. And Kamala Harris has a lot of momentum, as I said. It seems like she might even be able to steamroll Trump if she plays her cards right, especially if she avoids cringy moments like Amy Klobuchar's infamous hair in a blizzard joke that, was pretty, let's just say unimpressive. And it helps that Kamala can actually put sentences together. Imagine that. I kind of hate to pick on Joe Biden in a way, for his age and all that kind of stuff, but at the same time, he was backing a genocide, so I'm not going to feel too bad about it either. Now I have to admit, I didn't think that Biden would drop out at first. It seemed like it would be too much of a blow to his ego, especially with all those riding with Biden supporters who refused to see the writing on the wall. But here we are. It's actually happened. Biden has passed the torch, and the focus is no longer on whether the Democratic nominee can string a coherent sentence together. This shift alone has brought a glimmer of hope to many who had resigned themselves to a second Trump term and possibly the end of elections in the US of A. So, yeah, that's maybe offering some people a little bit of a breather, especially when Trump has renewed his statements about wanting to be the last election, or at least the final free and fair election. So let's talk about Kamala's campaign. Initially, Biden's campaign was a fundraising powerhouse. Julie Chavez Rodriguez, the Biden-Harris 2024 campaign manager, boasted about their record-breaking efforts and their plans to expand their reach across the country. However, Biden's momentum fizzled out pretty drastically, especially after his, terrible debate performance and also his controversial stance on the Gaza conflict, which, or Gaza conflict, which is, just let the country that we're not supposed to criticize just kill everyone they want. Quite a disgusting approach to geopolitics. I mean, can you even call it something fancy like geopolitics at that point when it's just basically a slaughterhouse? Wiping out all these hospitals and schools and killing aid workers and just making it too obvious that it's not even, accidental deaths or anything like that. Even the Iraq War, as disgusting as that wasn't as blatantly obvious a crime as what's happening over there. But anyway, many hope Kamala will take a different approach on this issue. I'm not holding my breath, but maybe she will, and maybe she'll be a little bit more on the right side of history. I understand it's complicated, even though it seems disgusting to say that about the issue, but in American politics, you have to present yourself in a certain way or you won't get certain votes. And that's going to be tricky for anybody who's running, not just for president, but for any elected office in this country, either on the national level or state level or even nationally. Or I mean, not nationally, but locally at certain times. So Kamala has already shown that she's better at messaging, but there's more she could highlight, and that's what I'm going to get into next when I'm talking about GOP extremism. Remember when Trump had dinner with neo-Nazi Nick Fuentes right after declaring his candidacy back in, I guess, like 2021? The Democrats have been terrible at messaging, often failing to highlight such shocking associations. I mean, have they mentioned Nick Fuentes even once in a political ad? Not that I can recall. I haven't seen any news coverage of that in a while. It's almost like that's just completely a non-scandal. But many Americans would be horrified if they knew the extent of Fuentes' extremism, yet the Democratic Party rarely, if ever, mentions it. So get on the ball. Kamala Harris, go ahead. Take some of those clips of Nick Fuentes being a lunatic and, have a field day with them. It will cost Trump some votes if you do it. It's not just Fuentes, though he's bad enough. Several prominent Republicans have ties to extremist beliefs. Of course, there's Marjorie Taylor Greene. Then you have people like Paul Gosar and others who have associated with Fuentes. Fuentes' vision for America is terrifying, to say the least. He's advocating for a society where contraception, fornication outside of marriage, homosexuality, and women's rights are abolished. Kamala should occasionally remind voters of these connections. And if you want to see evidence of what kind of person he is, you can find it on Right Wing Watch, or on YouTube there's a video called The Definitive Compilation of Nick Fuentes Being an Authoritarian. You can find all these different Nazi quotes, including the ones about him wanting to have Jewish people killed. So to say he's a controversial person is really putting it lightly and downplaying just what type of a Nazi he is. So moving on from Fuentes, because I don't want to talk about him anymore, we also have Michelle Malkin, who, yes, also has associated with Nick Fuentes, but she's also a former Fox News contributor and syndicated columnist who has written extensively for the white nationalist site VDare. Despite being Filipino-American, Michelle Malkin has aligned herself with white nationalist ideologies and even celebrated the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II. And she didn't just write like a blog post about that or even an article in favor of it. She wrote an entire book about how good that was. So, dare I say it, someone might want to ask Fox News why she was a regular guest on Sean Hannity's program. Maybe ask him, ask Sean Hannity, hey, Sean, whatever happened to that Michelle Malkin lady? How come I don't see her on your show anymore? Is there some sort of scandalous reason that she's no longer as commonly displayed to spit venom at the audience? And it turns out there is. She's a freaking Nazi. She turned the heat up a little bit too much with the things she was talking about. So, moving on, you also have Ann Coulter, who's got a long history of saying truly disgusting things, and she recently went on record saying she would have voted for Vivek Ramaswamy as the frontrunner for the Republican Party, but there's one thing wrong with him, and she made this abundantly clear. Ramaswamy is Indian. Whoopsie! Another instance of her doing a racism. And I remember her way back in the day when she was saying that we should invade Muslim countries and convert them to Christianity. So when she said stuff like that, it was definitely over the line, but she hasn't changed. She hasn't really moderated her views all that much. I guess the best thing I could say about her is that she called out that, what's that movie called, 2,000 Mules or something? She called that a pile of crap movie, and I guess she can get some credit for that, but it's certainly not going to be a lot of credit. And as for another character, there's Stu Peters. He's an anti-vaxxer and far-right extremist who praised Hitler for burning books. Yeah, so basically a Nazi. And there's also Trump-backed House candidate Mark Burns, who believes wives should be submissive and obedient. Burns, despite being black, frequently appears on Stu Peters' Nazi-praising show. And he's prominent in the whole MAGA movement. And what about Lauren Witzke? She was the Republican nominee in Delaware's 2020 Senate race. She made statements against race mixing and other topics that would make any fascist proud, Of course, she's made homophobic remarks and probably believes in burning witches and all kinds of crazy stuff. And I'm also going to go local here. So I live in a place called the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. There's a small city here called Calumet. And one of the January 6th rioters, named Carl Dresch, was actually from Calumet. And not only was he there at January 6th, but he spouted Nazi talking points on Gab. And the Houghton County Sheriff, my local sheriff at the time, named Brian McLean, even praised the rioter as strong-willed and strong-principled. And he was also somebody, this Carl Dresch guy, he was also somebody who was in a high-speed car chase with the police, I believe. And I guess that's what somebody who's strong-willed and strong-principled might have happened to him. He might be a criminal. But he's a Nazi, so I guess that was good for our Houghton County Sheriff at the time. Now, Brian McLean died, and we have a new sheriff who coincidentally actually went to high school with, but, it's not very reassuring when somebody like that is being praised by your local sheriff. And let's not forget other people who have made some news lately. There's the honorary Klansman running for governor of Missouri, and there was a white nationalist Republican named Judd Blevins who was thankfully voted out in Oklahoma in a recall election. And I'll even give Republicans a little credit here. The Republicans joined in the efforts to recall Judd Blevins, that Nazi scumbag. So there are still some good Republicans out there, as crazy as I feel saying that. But that story kind of proves it. So Kamala has plenty of material to work with if she wants to highlight extremism in the Republican Party. Hopefully her strategists, who are being praised as a crack team, will encourage her to mention these connections. Now, again, she doesn't have to bring them up all the time. There's a problem if you hammer on any single message too often. It becomes one note and voters might tune it out, but definitely sometimes bring this stuff up. This election cycle is shaping up to be one for the history books. It's not just about tax reform or Medicare's future or things like that. It's about the future of democracy.